And here we come now to our final, at least I hope so. Yeah, I promise, final bonus edition of the book of Revelation. I told you we'd do one more on a timeline. This will be a very, very short one. But for those of you who are interested in Revelation timelines, first of all, why am I not all that interested in it? Because I think if the timeline was what mattered, God knows how to put one in his book. He didn't put an obvious timeline in the book, so I don't think the timeline is as important as we like to make it out to be. But it is of interest to people, and are some things to learn about when you can see it clearly. So when I talk about timeline, if you're not familiar with what it means, what does it mean? Well, here's an example of it. And again, I got to get my head out of the way here. Um, when I was growing up in the church, it seemed like once every year or so, you'd have a special speaker come in and they'd unroll, sometimes against the entire wall, because back then we didn't have screens in churches, massive charts that would look something like this. And they were always kind of cool, but complicated and scary. And I'm just putting this up as an example of the kind of things we used to do and kind of show you what's in here. There's actually a lot of work in this, and it's kind of cool. So you've got here all the way, over to the left here where you can see this, the crucifixion, the resurrection of Christ. Then you've got the priesthood of Christ, the things that are described in Hebrews chapter 4. The church, the body of Christ, as described in Revelation chapters 2 and 3, happened here. The rapture of the church will occur here. Then it tells us that the seven trumpets happen in the first half of the tribulation, that the seven bowls the seven seals and trumpets will happen in the first half of the tribulation. The seven bowls will happen in the last half of the tribulation. You'll notice the way it's illustrated here. There are some very, very thoughtful ways. You see the scroll and the seals over here, but then you also see as it unrolls that the scroll is still involved, because as we talked about when we went through it, right? The last seal opens up the seven trumpets, and the last trumpet opens up the seven bowls or vials of the wrath of God, right? So each time the scroll is still there to show us that all of this still comes out of the scroll. You've got here, it shows you who are the main actors in this time, for both good and evil: the woman, the man child, Michael, the dragon, the beast, and so on, right? You've got showing, the things that are happening in the spiritual world underneath: death and the grave, Hades, and the bottomless pit, the abyss, right? All of that. Out of here, you've got Babylon coming to her doom, the Lord coming to earth. This is where the actual second coming takes place, right? So here you've got the rapture. Here you've got the second coming. They delineate the difference between the two in this chart, right? And then millennium, where Israel is restored back again. After the millennium, the fire that comes down from heaven, the lake of fire, which is the ultimate destination of those who die without Christ, the great white throne of judge, great white throne, which designates who's going to end up there, and then the new heaven and the new earth where we'll live forever. So when you first look at it, it's almost headache inducing because it's so complicated. But if you spend some time with it, you see a whole lot of things in here that are actually pretty cool. So if you want to screenshot that, go ahead. You can take a look at it for yourself later on. There's a lot of kind of interesting stuff in there. Here's a much more simplified view of a simple timeline of when things happen. So if you just want to get an idea of what happens when, let me get myself completely out of the way so you can screenshot that properly without me being in the way. All the way back here from the crucifixion to the church age, as it says here, an unknown time frame. We do not know how long we will live in this age as we currently live, in which the church is the way that God shows his presence on the earth. Christ will come like a thief in the night, right? Out of First Thessalonians. So you have the rapture, or what's here called the resurrection of the saints, which begins the 7 years of tribulation, 3.5 years of tribulation, 3.5 years of great tribulation. It mentions the scrolls, the trumpets, the bowls, the false prophets, Satan, the two witnesses, right? All of this happens during the tribulation. Then you have Jesus' second coming. He comes to earth at the Battle of Armageddon. You then have the millennium of 1,000 years reigning on earth with Christ, the dragon cast into the abyss, shut up and sealed for that. Then you have that spot at the end of the millennium where those who have died without Christ are brought up and are judged at the white throne of judgment, which comes down. So there's a meeting here where the white throne judges those who died without Christ. And after that, those who are without Christ are sent down to their eternal state, and we go up to our eternal state. So this is really simple, but there's quite a bit in this as well. So if you're interested, again, in a timeline that shows you in a real simple way that you can look back on what Revelation might look like timeline wise, that's helpful too. Let me also add one more thing to it. There's a great video series on YouTube called The Bible Project. If you've been in on our Ephesians study that we did before, which is not on video, so don't go looking for it, but we did it in our home. I showed you at the beginning of that a video from the Bible Project. And the Bible Project takes something like this. It's like a scroll, only they do all of this live action like they're drawing it on a piece of paper. And it's really cool, really, really well done. And so it begins like this. As it goes through, it adds pieces like this. So, it's added in order. They draw this in, then they draw this in, then they, or one, then this, right? And then they draw them in as it goes along, and then it adds to it and goes through until finally it ends up looking like this. Let me get myself out of the way because that is so cool to see, right? That's the entire thing, which at first is like, I don't even want to go near that. But they take the time to draw it through all the way through each piece one at a time with a full explanation. It's fast. You may need to look at it several times, but you will see a lot of confirmation of what we talked about through the series if you take a look at it, and it ends up with this chart. If you want to find that, if you're interested in seeing the entire thing, there's so much of it. It's in two parts, but here's how you get there. Go to YouTube. When you get to YouTube, in the search bar at YouTube, put in Bible Project. When you put Bible Project into the search bar at YouTube and hit enter, you will come up with the Bible Project page, which will look like this. Once the Bible Project page is brought up, go over here to this magnifying glass, click on it, and then put in the word Revelation. And when you put in the word Revelation, this will come up. The first part 1 of 2 and part 2 of 2. You'll notice they're very short, just under 12 minutes each. But by the end of these 2, you're going to get that huge chart that you saw. But it'll be piece by piece, really well explained, really well visualized. The art is great. The theology is good. It's solid. So of all of the kind of timelines or visualizations of Revelation that I recommend, the one from the Bible Project is the best one I've seen. If you want a simple one, use the second one. If you want kind of an old school one, you can see the first one that we looked at. But either way, that gives you some idea of what a timeline of the book of Revelation is going to look like. And with that, finally, for good and forever, at least for now, we are done with our book of Revelation study. We're done with the bonus episodes. I've been thrilled to offer this to you. And starting next week, we'll get to our next study